So, I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. I've been married to Lauren for 20 years. 2 decades of what I thought was a solid, happy marriage. We weren't perfect, but we had a good life. Or at least I did. Now, I'm realizing she might have been living a completely different reality. It all started one morning before I left for work. Lauren was acting weird. Quiet, distracted, almost nervous. Right as I was grabbing my keys, she said, "We need to talk tonight." That's it. No explanation. Just that. I don't know if you've ever had your stomach drop like that, but it was like a lead weight hit me in the gut. I spent the entire day at work barely functioning, my mind running through every possible scenario. Was she sick? Did I do something wrong? Was she cheating? No, that wasn't Lauren. Or so I thought. By the time I got home, I was a wreck. But there she was, acting totally normal. Too normal. She even made my favorite dinner, pot roast, mashed potatoes, the works. That should have been a red flag right there. After dinner, we sat down, and she took a deep breath. "Nick, I love you. I really do. But I need some space." "Space," I repeated. My brain was trying to keep up, but it was like she had dropped a grenade in my lap and walked away. Yeah, I just feel drained. I need to recharge, Find myself again. That's when she hit me with the kicker. She already had a place to stay. With Clara. Now, if you knew Clara, you'd understand why this immediately set off every alarm bell in my head. Clara was the type of woman who left destruction in her wake. 3 failed marriages, a history of finding herself in other people's beds, and the emotional depth of a puddle. She was always whispering nonsense in Lauren's ear, filling her head with ideas about how marriage is a cage, and women should never settle. I was floored. "Lauren, is there someone else?" She looked offended, like I had slapped her across the face. "No, how could you even ask that? This isn't about anyone else. It's about me." But I didn't believe her. Not for a second. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "So what does this mean? You're leaving? Are we separating? Divorcing?" No, she said quickly. "It's not like that. I just need time away. A break. To think. Right? A break." We argued for a bit. Well, I argued, and she just kept repeating the same vague lines about space and self-discovery. But at the end of it, she was leaving. That night, I watched as she packed a bag, acting like this was some casual trip, like she wasn't ripping our entire life apart. I kept waiting for her to change her mind, to look at me and realize this was insane. She didn't. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd call me in a few days, and then she was gone. And I was just left standing there, feeling like I had lost everything in the span of one dinner. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind kept replaying our conversation, trying to find the moment where everything had gone wrong. Had I missed the signs? Was there something I could have done to stop this? By morning, reality started sinking in. My wife had packed a bag and left. Not for a business trip. Not for a family emergency. She had chosen to walk away from me to find herself. And the worst part? I didn't believe a damn word of it. I gave her space like she asked. No texts, no calls. I wanted to see how long it would take before she reached out. If this was just some break, like she claimed, she'd check in, right? Days passed. Nothing. On the 4th day, I finally caved and texted her. "Me, hey, just checking in. Are you okay?" She didn't respond for 6 hours. Then finally, "Lauren, hey, sorry. I've just been so busy. I'm doing okay. Hope you are too." Busy? Busy doing what? She had left to get space, to clear her head. What exactly was keeping her so busy that she couldn't text her husband back? That was my first real clue that something was off. But the second one came that night. I had just finished eating dinner alone. First time in 20 years. By the way, real fun experience. And I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a notification pop up. Clara posted a new photo. I almost didn't click on it. I mean, why would I? But something told me to check. And there it was. A picture of a fancy restaurant. Wine glasses, expensive-looking food, candles, a date setting if I'd ever seen one. The caption, "Girls' Night. Much needed fun." Girls' night? Really? Now, I'm not a genius, but one thing stuck out immediately. There were 2 plates of food, 2 wine glasses, but Clara was the only one in the picture. I don't know what made me do it, but I scrolled through the comments. And that's when I saw it. Some guy named Jake commented, "Great night. Babe, can't wait for the next one." Babe? I clicked on his profile. Private. But his profile picture? A selfie of him sitting in the same damn restaurant, same wine glass in front of him. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into full-blown nausea. Lauren wasn't alone. I immediately called her. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. My wife was out with someone else, and she had lied about it. I don't know why, but I felt this overwhelming need to confirm it. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe she was telling the truth, that there was some logical explanation. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I got in my car, and I drove straight to Clara's place. What I saw when I got there, that's when everything really started falling apart. I don't even remember the drive to Clara's place. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white, my heart pounding like a war drum. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Lauren really was just having a girls' night. But deep down, I already knew. Clara lived in an apartment complex on the other side of town. I'd been there before. Lauren had dragged me to one of her wine and gossip nights a couple of times, but I never liked the place. Too small, too cluttered, too full of people with nothing better to do than ruin their own lives. I parked a little down the street, out of sight. My head was spinning. I had no plan. What was I even doing here? Was I just going to knock on the door and demand answers? What if I was wrong? Then, as I was sitting there debating, the decision was made for me. Because right then, the front door swung open, and out stepped Lauren. She wasn't alone. Some guy, Jake, I assumed, was right behind her. Tall, muscular, the type of guy who spent more time in the gym than doing anything productive. He was laughing at something, his hand casually resting on her lower back like he'd done it 1,000 times before. And Lauren? She looked happy, relaxed, like a woman who didn't have a husband waiting at home, wondering if his entire life was falling apart. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They walked to his car, chatting like a couple of teenagers sneaking out after curfew. And then, before she got in, he kissed her. Not a quick peck, not a friendly gesture. A real kiss. The kind that only happens when there's something deep going on. That was it. That was all I needed to see. I got out of the car and walked straight toward them. "Lauren," I said, my voice calm. Too calm. She froze mid-laugh. The second she saw me, her face drained of color, like she'd just seen a ghost. "And Nick," she stammered. "What are you?" "I should be asking you that." I cut in. My eyes flicked to Jake, who was staring at me with a dumb expression, like he was trying to figure out who I was. "Who's this?" Lauren opened her mouth, closed it, looked like she was about to cry. "Nick, please, let's." Jake, the idiot, extended his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. "I'm Jake, man. You must be Nick." "I've heard." I ignored his hand completely. "You've heard what?" I asked, my voice sharp. Jake hesitated. He glanced at Lauren, suddenly looking uncomfortable. And that's when it hit me. He didn't know. This idiot had no idea Lauren was married. "You didn't tell him, did you?" I said, looking straight at her. "Nick, please," Lauren whispered. "Not here." "Why not?" I shot back. "Are you embarrassed? Or are you just afraid the truth is going to ruin whatever fantasy you've got going on?" Jake finally caught up. His brows furrowed. "Wait, what's going on?" I turned to him. "She's my wife." Jake's face turned to stone. He slowly turned to look at Lauren, who was now full-on panicking. "Lauren, I was going to tell you," she said quickly. Jake actually took a step back, running a hand over his face. "Oh, hell no," he muttered. "You told me you were divorced." I'm done," he snapped. He didn't even look at me again. He just turned, got in his car, and drove off. leaving Lauren standing there looking like her world had just crashed around her. Good. She turned to me, tears brimming in her eyes. Nick, please, let's go home and talk about this. I let out a short laugh. Home? Home? The place where my wife just walked out on me so she could sneak around with some guy who didn't even know I existed. I shook my head. No, Lauren. You made your choice. Tears started spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't like that. I was confused. I just needed. I stepped closer, my voice low. Don't lie to me again. She shut up. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. And for the first time in 20 years, I realized I didn't recognize the woman in front of me anymore. Then I turned around, got back in my car, and drove away. And I knew, without a doubt, that things were about to get so much worse. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so bad I had to pull over a few blocks away just to breathe. I had seen it with my own eyes. Lauren, kissing another man, acting like a single woman, not someone who had a husband who had given her 20 years of his life. And then she had the audacity to say, let's go home and talk about this. Home? That place didn't feel like home anymore. My phone buzzed. Lauren. I stared at it for a long time, then finally answered. Nick, please, just come home. We need to talk. I let out a short laugh. Talk? Now you want to talk? It's not what you think, she rushed out. I just needed time, and things got confusing. Confusing. My voice was sharp now. Lauren, you told this guy you were divorced. Do you even realize how sick that is? She fell silent, and in that silence, I knew. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, I said finally. Nick, please. I hung up, because if I didn't, I was going to say something I couldn't take back. I checked into a cheap hotel near my office. The second I got into the room, I just collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, but at the same time, it felt empty, like I was watching my own life fall apart from a distance. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up to knocking. For a second, I thought I had dreamed it. Then it happened again. I groggily got up, checking the peephole. Lauren. Of course. I sighed, opening the door just enough to look at her. She had been crying. Good. Nick, please, she said, her voice trembling. Just let me explain. I folded my arms. Explain what? That you left to find yourself and somehow landed in another man's arms. She winced. It wasn't like that. Oh, really? I scoffed. Then tell me, Lauren, what was it like? She took a shaky breath. I was feeling lost. Stuck. I didn't know who I was anymore. And Clara told me, maybe I just needed some time away. I snorted. Clara? Clara told you that? The same Clara who has never been in a relationship that lasted longer than a carton of milk. She just wanted me to be happy. No. She wanted you to be single and miserable like her. Lauren's lips trembled. I didn't cheat. Nick. Not at first. I really was just trying to clear my head. But then Jake. He made me feel seen. That did it. I laughed. A full, bitter laugh that probably made me sound insane. Seen. I repeated. Lauren, I've been with you for 20 years. You were my entire world, and you're telling me some guy you just met made you feel seen? She wiped at her eyes. I don't know how it happened. It was just selfish. I finished for her. It was selfish, Lauren. You didn't want space. You wanted an escape, without the guilt of admitting what you really wanted. She didn't deny it. That was all I needed. I took a step back and shook my head. Go home, Lauren. Her face crumpled. Nick, go home, I repeated, my voice like stone. Because after what you've done, that's not my home anymore. And then, for the first time since this nightmare started, I shut the door in her face. I didn't sleep much that night, lying in that hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything kept replaying in my head. Lauren's excuses, her lies, that pathetic I needed to feel seen line. I had given her 20 years. 20 years. And she threw it away for what? Some random guy who didn't even know she was married? By morning, something in me had shifted. The heartbreak was still there, but now it was sitting right next to something else. Anger. Not the kind that makes you yell or punch walls. No, this was a cold, steady kind of anger. The kind that makes you see things clearly for the first time. Lauren wanted space. She was about to get all the space she could handle. I went home later that day, but not for her. I needed to grab some things, figure out my next move. The second I walked in, she was there. She looked awful. Messy hair, puffy eyes, still in the clothes from last night. For a brief second, the part of me that had loved her for 20 years wanted to comfort her. But then I remembered what she did. She stood up from the couch, wringing her hands. "Nick, I'm so sorry." I ignored her and walked past her to the bedroom. "Please," she whispered behind me. "Just talk to me." I turned, finally looking at her. "Talk?" I said flatly, "like how you talk to Jake, or Clara, or literally anyone else but me." She flinched. "I messed up. I know I did. But I don't want to lose you, Nick." I let out a slow breath. "You already did." She shook her head frantically, stepping closer. "No, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can—" I held up a hand. "Stop." She froze. "You didn't just make a mistake, Lauren. You made choices. You chose to lie. You chose to leave. You chose to let another man touch you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't sleep with him," she said desperately. "I swear. Nick, we kissed. But that's it." I tilted my head. "And I'm supposed to believe that?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, because I wouldn't lie to you about that." I just stared at her. "You are lying. Right now." She sucked in a shaky breath, her face crumbling. "Nick." "No," I cut her off. "You don't get to cry. I get to cry. I get to be hurt. You made this bed. Now lie in it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew. She knew I was right. I started packing. I wasn't going to stay in our house anymore. She had tainted it. Every room was filled with memories that felt like a sick joke now. Lauren followed me, panicked. "Where are you going?" I zipped up my bag. "Somewhere that isn't here." She grabbed my arm. "Nick, please don't do this. I love you." Pulled away. "No, Lauren. You loved the version of me that didn't know the truth. The version of me that would have done anything for you. But that man, he's gone." Her face twisted with guilt, regret, maybe even fear. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. I walked to the door, and she stood there, shaking. "You're really leaving?" she whispered. I turned back one last time. "I already left. You just didn't notice." Then I walked out. And this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. Leaving that house should have felt freeing. Like I was finally taking control of my life after being blindsided. But the second I got into my car, it hit me. This wasn't just some fight. This was the end. 20 years wiped out. Just like that. I sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for some kind of relief to wash over me. It never came. Instead, my phone started buzzing. "Lauren." Decline. A minute later, another call. Decline. Then a text. "Please don't do this. Just talk to me. Please." I put my phone face down and started the car. I had nothing left to say to her. I checked into the hotel again, planning my next move. I needed a lawyer, needed to figure out finances, needed to start thinking like a man who wasn't married anymore. But before I could even settle in, there was a knock at the door. I knew before I even looked who it was. I yanked it open. Lauren, soaked from the rain, crying, holding something in her hands. "Nick, please," she choked out. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Lauren, you need to stop. She held up a small box. "I found this in your dresser." I glanced at it. My old wedding vows. A box of letters we had written to each other over the years. She sniffled. "Do you remember what you wrote to me?" I clenched my jaw. "Don't do this." She opened the box and pulled out a letter. Her hands were shaking as she unfolded it. "Nick," you said, "no matter what happens, no matter how hard life gets, I will always fight for you. For us, I swallowed hard. Because yeah, I had said that. She looked up at me, tears streaming. Are you really not going to fight for us? And for the first time in days, I actually felt something close to rage. I took a slow step toward her. Lauren, I fought for us every single day for 20 years. I fought when you were unhappy. I fought when you needed support. I fought when you said you needed space. I exhaled sharply. You want to know when I stopped fighting? She swallowed hard. When I found out you were fighting for someone else. Her face crumpled. It wasn't like that. Stop saying that, I snapped. It was like that. You don't get to stand here and use my own words against me after you threw me away for some guy who didn't even know you were married. She sobbed harder. I didn't mean to. You did mean to, I cut in. You just didn't mean to get caught. Silence. I shook my head. Go home, Lauren. There's nothing left to fix. She hesitated, like she had something else to say. But in the end, she just clutched that box to her chest, turned, and walked away. And this time, I didn't watch her leave. After Lauren left my hotel room, I expected the calls and texts to slow down. They didn't. By the next morning, I had 8 missed calls, a flood of texts, and even a couple of emails, because apparently when a cheater gets desperate, they start using every possible way to reach you. I ignored all of them. But then, as I was grabbing coffee from the lobby, I ran into someone I did not expect. Clara. She was standing there, sipping some overpriced latte like she didn't have a care in the world. The second she spotted me, her lips curled into this fake little smirk. Well, if it isn't the broken-hearted husband, she said. I stared at her. You know, for someone who just helped blow up a 20-year marriage, you look pretty damn relaxed. She laughed. Oh, come on, Nick. You act like Lauren was some devoted housewife before she left. My entire body tensed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Clara took a slow sip of her coffee, like she was enjoying this. You think Jake was the first guy she got close to? The ground felt like it shifted beneath me. Explain, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Clara shrugged. Lauren's been questioning things for a while now. The space thing? Not new. She's been testing the waters for months. She smiled. You just weren't paying attention. I clenched my fists. You're lying. She leaned in slightly. Am I? I wanted to believe she was. I needed to believe she was. But deep down, something in me was screaming that Clara was telling the truth. I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret. By the time I got back to my hotel room, my hands were shaking. Not from sadness. Not even from betrayal. From rage. Lauren had made me feel like a fool. Like some clueless husband who never saw it coming. But she had been planning this. For months. I pulled out my phone and, for the first time since I left, I called her. She answered on the first ring. Nick, tell me the truth, I said. Were there others before Jake? Silence. Then a choked breath. Where is this coming from? I let out a bitter laugh. That's not an answer. More silence. Then finally, there was someone I talked to, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. A coworker. A few months ago. But nothing happened. We just talked. I squeezed my eyes shut. Define talked. Texting. Flirting. It wasn't serious. I stopped it before it got out of hand. I felt like I was going to be sick. So this is what space meant to you? I said, my voice cold. Lining up your next option while keeping me on standby? No, she said quickly. It wasn't like that. I let out a slow breath. You know what, Lauren? I don't even care anymore. She sucked in a breath. Nick, please. Don't call me again, I said, my voice steady. I'm done listening to your excuses. Then, for the last time, I hung up. And this time, I blocked her number. Blocking Lauren should have felt good. Should have felt like a clean break. But when you've spent 20 years with someone, cutting them off doesn't erase them overnight. Still, I meant what I said. I was done listening to her excuses. But Lauren, she wasn't done talking. I found that out the next morning when my manager called me into his office. You okay, Nick? He asked, looking concerned. I frowned. Yeah. Why? He hesitated, then sighed. Your wife called here. Twice. I felt my stomach drop. What? She said she couldn't reach you and was worried about you. Wanted to know if you were at work. He leaned forward. I told her you were fine. But Nick, she sounded unstable. I let out a slow breath, my fists clenching. I blocked her number. That explains it. He sighed. Look, I don't want to get in your business, but maybe you should talk to her. Just to shut this down before it gets messy, eh? I shook my head. No, that's exactly what she wants. And I wasn't giving her a damn thing. By the time I left work, I had 3 emails from Lauren. I didn't open them. Didn't need to. The subject lines told me everything. Nick, please don't shut me out. You don't understand. Just hear me out. I messed up, but this isn't fair. I deleted them all. Then, as I was pulling into my hotel parking lot, I saw it. Lauren, sitting on the hood of my car. Waiting. I gritted my teeth and got out. What the hell are you doing here? She stood up, looking exhausted, eyes swollen from crying. You blocked me. I didn't know what else to do. I folded my arms. Take the hint, Lauren. She wiped her nose. Nick, I don't know how to do this without you. I scoffed. Funny, you didn't seem to have a problem when you were sneaking around with Jake. She flinched. That's not fair. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, now we're talking about fairness? She took a shaky breath. I made a mistake. A huge one. But I don't know how to move on from this. That's not my problem. Her lips trembled. You don't even care? I exhaled sharply. Lauren, I spent 20 years caring. I cared when you were unhappy. I cared when you said you needed space. And I cared even after you left me for another man. I met her eyes, my voice steady. But now, I care about me for once. She broke down completely then. Hands over her face, body shaking with sobs. And I just stood there watching. Because for the first time, her pain wasn't my responsibility. Lauren stood there, falling apart, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not sympathy, just emptiness. Because for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. A woman who only cared about me when she had no one else left. I don't know how to do this without you, she sobbed. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Lauren, you chose this. She shook her head frantically. No, I didn't choose to lose you. I made a mistake. But we can fix this, Nick. Please. I stared at her, completely calm. We didn't do anything. You made your choices. And now, you're alone. Her eyes widened in panic. No, I still have Clara. I let out a short laugh. Oh, do you? She froze, because she already knew. She already knew Clara had abandoned her the second things got messy. You really thought Clara would stick around after this? I said. She pushed you to ruin your marriage, and now she's off doing the same thing to someone else. That's who she is. Lauren's breath hitched, and I saw it, the realization hitting her like a truck. She had no one. Jake? Gone. Clara? Gone. And me? I wasn't her safety net anymore. I should go, she whispered, voice shaking. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. She turned to leave, but halfway to her car, she stopped and glanced back. Nick? I raised an eyebrow. Do you think someday we could? No, I said immediately. Her face crumpled. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I turned, walked into the hotel, and shut the door. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. After that night, I expected Lauren to finally back off. I was wrong. Over the next few days, I started hearing things. Friends texting me asking if I was okay. Co-workers giving me strange looks. Even my neighbor, who I barely talked to, stopped me in the hallway and said, Man, I heard about everything. That's rough. I frowned. What exactly did you hear? He hesitated. Just that you, might be going through some stuff. I sighed. Lauren's been talking, hasn't she? He scratched the back of his head. Look, man, I don't want to get in the middle. But, yeah, she's been reaching out to people, saying she messed up, that she wants to fix things. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course she was. She wasn't just desperate. She was trying to rewrite the story, and I wasn't going to let her. That night, I finally did what I had been avoiding. I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. The second I walked into that office, it felt real. Like this wasn't just a fight or a separation. This was the end. The lawyer was professional, direct. Went over finances, assets, how things would be divided. And then he asked, "Are you expecting any trouble from your wife?" I almost laughed. Not legally, but emotionally. She's going to make this hell. He nodded like he had seen this before. Then let's make sure she doesn't get the chance. We started drafting the papers right then. And when I walked out of that office, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I was going to deliver them in person. The next evening, I drove straight to our house. No warning. No texts. Lauren wanted to act like we could fix things. She was about to see exactly how over this was. I knocked on the door, and it only took a few seconds before she opened it. The second she saw me standing there, she looked hopeful. "Nick," she breathed, her lips trembling. "You?" I pulled the divorce papers from my jacket and handed them to her. Her face dropped. She stared at the papers like she couldn't even process what was happening. What is this?" I crossed my arms. "You know exactly what it is." Her hands started shaking. "Nick, please don't do this." "I already did," I said coldly. "And so did you, the second you walked out of here and into another man's arms." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But I thought we could talk." I cut her off. "We did. And I listened to every single excuse you had. But at the end of the day, Lauren, the facts don't change. You destroyed our marriage. Not me." She shook her head frantically, flipping through the pages. "This is too fast. We need to slow down, think about this." "There's nothing to think about." Her breathing became ragged. "Nick, please. I'll do anything." I tilted my head. "Anything?" She nodded quickly, desperate. I took a slow step forward. "Then sign the papers." She let out a strangled sob. And I just stood there, watching her finally realize she couldn't talk her way out of this. Lauren stood there, gripping the divorce papers like they physically hurt her. Her lips trembled. "Nick, please. This isn't us. This isn't how we end." I stared at her, completely calm. "Lauren, you ended us the second you decided to lie to me." She shook her head violently. No, I was confused. I made a mistake. But this is permanent." I folded my arms. "That's the point." She choked on a sob. "But I love you." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "No, you don't." Her eyes widened, like I had just slapped her. "How can you say that?" "Because love isn't lying. Love isn't betrayal. Love isn't walking out and only coming back when you realize you lost everything." I met her gaze. "You don't love me, Lauren. You miss what I gave you." She covered her mouth, shaking with sobs. I let the silence stretch between us. Let her sit in the reality she had created. Then I took a step back. "I'll be in touch about the paperwork. Have a nice life, Lauren." I turned to leave, but right as I reached the door, she collapsed. Not metaphorically, literally. Her legs gave out, and she hit the floor, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I paused for half a second. Not because I felt bad, because I didn't, but because I realized something. This was the moment she finally understood. She had ruined everything, and I wasn't coming back. I walked out without looking back, because this time, she was the one being left behind. I didn't look back as I walked to my car. Didn't check to see if Lauren picked herself up off the floor. That was her problem now. But the moment I shut my car door, my phone lit up. "Lauren? Unblocked number. Nick, please, just talk to me. I can't do this without you." "Lauren? Unblocked number. I'll change. I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do." "Lauren? Unblocked number. Please don't leave me like this." I stared at the messages for a long time. Then, I blocked her again. She didn't deserve my time anymore. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No calls. No emails. No random people telling me Lauren had reached out to them. And I knew that wasn't because she had accepted things. It was because she was planning something. I found out what a few days later when I ran into Clara. Again. I was grabbing groceries when I heard someone say, "You're really doing this?" Huh? I turned, and there she was, smirking like she had some kind of moral high ground. I let out a tired sigh. "What do you want, Clara?" She shrugged. "Nothing. Just wondering if you're really gonna leave Lauren after everything you've been through." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean after everything she put me through?" She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Nick. You really think this is all her fault?" I just stared at her. "Yes," Clara scoffed. "God." No wonder she felt stuck. Something in me snapped. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. "Let me ask you something, Clara. Do you actually believe the garbage you feed people? Or do you just enjoy watching their lives burn?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" I gestured around us. Lauren lost everything. Her marriage, her reputation, her stability. And where were you, huh? You pushed her to find herself. But the second she needed support, you vanished. Clara opened her mouth, then shut it, because she knew I was right. I shook my head. "You're not a friend, Clara. You're a wrecking ball. And now that Lauren has to live in the ruins, you don't want any part of it." Her face twisted in irritation. "Whatever," she muttered, turning to leave. But before she walked away, she threw one last thing over her shoulder. "She's not doing too well, you know." I didn't flinch. Not my problem. And for the first time, I actually believed it. After running into Clara, I knew it was only a matter of time before Lauren tried one last, desperate move. I didn't have to wait long. The very next night, as I was settling into my new apartment, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it was. I opened it, and there she stood. Lauren. She looked wrecked. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unkempt, like she hadn't slept in days. She clutched her arms like she was holding herself together. I leaned against the doorframe. "Lauren." She swallowed hard. "Nick, please. Just 5 minutes." I exhaled sharply, debating. Then, finally, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, taking everything in, like she was realizing this wasn't her space anymore. I folded my arms. "Say what you need to say." She turned to face me, eyes brimming with tears. "I messed up. I know that now. I was selfish, and I took you for granted." She wiped her nose. "I lost everything, Nick. You, my friends, my reputation. Even Clara won't talk to me anymore." I scoffed. "You think I feel bad for you?" She shook her head quickly. No, I don't know how to fix this." I met her gaze steady. "You can't." Her face crumpled. I let the silence hang between us before speaking again. "You thought I'd wait," I said quietly. "You thought you could go out, find yourself, and I'd just be here. Like always." She let out a broken sob. "I was stupid." I nodded. "Yeah. You were." She stepped closer. "Nick, I still love you." I didn't flinch. "No, you love the idea of me. The safety I gave you. The comfort." I tilted my head. "But you didn't love me enough to choose me." Tears streamed down her face. "Is there really no chance?" I shook my head. "None." She let out a choked breath. "I don't know how to live without you." I stared at her for a long moment. Then I shrugged. "Not my problem." A sharp gasp escaped her lips, like the words physically hurt her. And maybe they did, because for the first time she understood. This was real. This was forever. I walked to the door and held it open. She stared at me like she was waiting for something, some sign that I'd take it back. But I didn't. And eventually, she walked out. For the last time. After Lauren walked out of my apartment, I didn't feel some big, dramatic sense of closure. No instant relief. No overwhelming happiness. Just quiet. And honestly, that was enough. She didn't text. Didn't call. No more emails. No more desperate attempts to reach me. She was finally gone. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Lauren didn't fight it. She didn't ask for anything. Maybe she finally realized she didn't deserve to. I didn't go out and celebrate. Didn't throw some party or post some dramatic speech online. I just moved on. I rebuilt my life on my terms. Got a better apartment. Reconnected with old friends. Started doing things for me again, instead of constantly trying to keep someone else happy. And you know what? I was happier than I had been in years. As for Lauren, I heard bits and pieces. She tried dating, but apparently word got around. People knew what she did. She wasn't the victim she wanted to be. Clara? Nowhere to be found. Probably ruining someone else's life. And Jake? He wanted nothing to do with her. She got exactly what she asked for, freedom. But it turns out, freedom isn't so great when you have no one to share it with. One night, months later, I got one final message. Lauren, I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a while. Then, I deleted it. Because at that point, she didn't matter anymore. This was my life now. And it felt damn good.